My grandson branded me a gold digger because I married his father, who was living on my dime, and I became upset with him because I did not tell him what he did wrong after he destroyed my car. To provide some context, Thomas and I have been married for 2 years after dating for 6. He was previously married and had a kid from that marriage, who is now 19 years old. Unfortunately, his first wife died from a stroke approximately 5 years before we met. Rob, his 9-year-old son, took it really poorly. He was highly tormented as a child, and his issues worsened with age. When I initially met him, I didn't like getting to know him since he was quite open about the fact that I would never be able to replace his mother and that he would never accept me into the family. I was not even somewhat interested in doing that. Even though I attempted to be friends with him, the child merely wanted me to break up with him and go on. Thomas informed me they tried everything they could think of, but he still didn't appear to want to improve. I'd also informed him about it. And I advised that he take Rob to therapy to help him cope with his concerns. After the loss of his first wife, Thomas had long given up on dating. However, after meeting me, he changed his mind. I was pretty much the first serious lady he dated after his wife passed away. He had gone on a few dates that year, but no one until me had been able to persuade him to agree to a second date, and he told me so immediately away. Thomas has always been honest and transparent with me. I was also advised that Rob would be unfriendly because he is still grieving the death of his mother. That's why he wanted to take it easy with me before bringing me into the family. So we were actually together for a year before he took me home. Rob was quite harsh to me for the first several years. All he could do was be disrespectful and throw outbursts at me. I stopped paying attention to him shortly after since it wasn't worth it to try to reason with him, even if I tried to understand and be friendly to him initially. I'd also informed Thomas several times that he needed to take action regarding his son's conduct. Thomas would occasionally chastise Rob, but it would be ineffective since Rob would simply return to his usual behavior. Since then, I have genuinely and passionately loved Thomas with all my heart. This made me know that I needed to make things right with him, no matter what. So I stayed with him for over 6 years, even though he constantly let his child off the hook. But recently, something happened that prompted me to make a shift. Thomas had launched a new firm 3 years before I accepted his offer. Unfortunately, it did not work out, and despite his efforts for several years, his finances have not improved. I let him try to operate his business for nearly 3 years since it was his passion. I encouraged him to go back to work or find something else to do because it was obvious that things were not going well for him, even if they hadn't taken off yet. We've primarily survived on my money for the past 3 years, so I started urging him a few months ago that he should quit his business and try something new. I'm concerned since my wage is insufficient to sustain my family, and when I retire, I won't have much money left over, so my objective has been to gently guide Thomas in the correct way. His resistance to quit up was tenacious, and he continued giving me reasons not to give up, such as needing more time to work on his business plan. Even though I desperately wanted to understand, I realized this was not working, and I couldn't keep assisting him. I believe his son overheard us talking about it since we had been arguing a lot lately, and assumed I was attempting to gain money by advising Thomas to sell his business to anybody who was interested and return to work. That saddened me since I've always been able to look for myself without the need for money. I couldn't bear being told that I needed my spouse's money when it was the opposite. When I asked Rob to perform some work a few weeks ago, he stated he wouldn't because I was a useless jerk who just worried about making money. I was obviously astonished, so I asked him what he meant, and he explained why he said what he said. As a result, I felt compelled to respond to Rob's accusation that I was a gold digger. That being said, I had sought him for guidance before correcting him. After the quarrel ended, Thomas warned me not to tell Rob that we had been relying on my money for a long time. Rob didn't want to ruin his reputation in front of his kid since he believed admitting he had financial troubles would be embarrassing. Thomas would be embarrassed to show his child where he had fallen, so I gave in. Tom begged me not to tell him the truth. However, I suffered for it since Rob began to exploit the fact that he suspected I was hunting for money against me after that day. This made it extremely tempting for me to tell him the truth. Things grew increasingly tough for me. But I needed to keep silent for Thomas' sake. When Rob returned from his winter vacation, I knew he would be leaving in a few weeks. I only had to cope with him for a few weeks because I had already lived with his nasty conduct for years. I didn't think it would be very difficult. However, I believe Rob intended to go the additional mile this time, making things considerably more difficult for me. Thus, a few days ago he borrowed my car without my permission and smashed it moments before I was about to depart for a critical meeting that we had been discussing for days. I normally leave for work around 9 a.m. I had to leave early that day, however, since I had a crucial appointment with a customer. I'm so pleased I had prepared beforehand. Rob had already begun getting dressed, so when I walked outside to check on my car, I noticed that the hood had a large damage in it and the sides were severely scarred. Rob was standing next to the car with the keys in his hand, and a proud expression on his face, as if he had accomplished something amazing, which made me even more upset. I was obviously disappointed down. My spouse and I hadn't left for work yet at the time. It drove me insane when I saw him and what he'd done to the automobile. I began flipping out at him. Violence is not something I usually do, but that day I lost control and hit Rob in the face. I don't feel particularly horrible about it. Someone called Rob attempted to shove me, but Thomas walked out of the home and stopped him before he could do so. I was annoyed because I couldn't take that automobile to the meeting right now, even though it wasn't a major problem. My automobile was very significant to me because it was one of the first purchases I made with my own money. I couldn't imagine taking a cab to a meeting with a significant customer for my job. It would only appear unusual, and I was as upset as everyone else about what had occurred. But Rob didn't seem to be upset about anything. In fact, he was shouting at me as his father attempted to intervene and told me that this should demonstrate where I belong. At the end of the day, I knew he felt it was foolish that I had been discussing this crucial meeting for days, and that I was too arrogant for someone who relied on my husband for financial support. Because I would be living on his money, he wanted to know how false and funny I was. He then kicked my car again, called me a gold digger, and spat on the ground, despite Thomas' attempts to stop him. I continued to rant at him, telling him that this was my punishment for attempting to persuade his father to sell his business so that I could make more money. I told Thomas everything, because I felt I couldn't lie to him anymore. I believed he deserved it, so I attempted to be as cruel to him as possible. I didn't care that I was an adult lady fighting a 19-year-old guy. All I wanted was to hurt him. I informed him that his father's firm had been collapsing for 3 years, and that I had been carrying their heavy weight. Instead of being appreciative for my assistance, he attempted to bring me down. Furthermore, I informed him that I would now be paying for his college expenses, therefore it was irrelevant that his father had previously pledged to return me as soon as possible. Because of this, he had no right to treat me that way or refer to me as a gold digger, because they, not I, needed the money. His face revealed a condition of total astonishment and immobility which was evident in both him and Thomas. I brushed away my tears and prepared to depart. I phoned a cab to drive me to the meeting location. I did not look around because I didn't want him to enjoy watching me cry. I arrived and left early enough for the meeting to proceed successfully, thank goodness. But that was probably only in my thoughts. I had plenty of time to cool down and seem serious, and the fact that I chose to travel in a cabin rather than my own automobile didn't seem that significant. When I returned home, my car was still there, so I contacted a friend who runs a car repair business and asked her to take care of it. I'm not sure why, but seeing my automobile in that state made me feel horrible again, so I decided to stay outside the house. I hopped into another cab and drove directly to a neighboring motel. I haven't returned home since. I felt ashamed in my own home since Thomas couldn't talk to his child about it, and I was fed up with everything because of the state of my automobile. After that, I couldn't return to that house and attempt to make things right with them since they clearly didn't deserve it. The next day, after returning from my meeting and checking into my hotel, I continued to wait for Thomas, if not him, to phone to see how I was doing. But it did not happen either. I sobbed myself to sleep one night, and when I awoke I realized I couldn't live with these people anymore. And that love alone wasn't enough to sustain a relationship. It was determined that I would phone my lawyer and inform him that I was going to file for divorce. I contacted my brother straight after and informed him I did not want to meet Rob or Thomas. Instead, I wanted him to come to my house, pack certain items, and deliver them to me. After hearing a brief account of what occurred, he assisted me by returning my belongings. But Thomas went home to retrieve my belongings instead of me, so I suppose he realized I wouldn't be back soon, and he and his child began texting and calling me all the time. I disabled all of their notifications because I didn't want to worry about them, but I didn't block them since I was curious about what they had to say. I eventually decided to read the texts they had sent me before going to bed. What I discovered was that all they wanted to do was apologize and promise to make things right if I could simply speak with them again. I expected Thomas to say that, but what surprised me was Rob's willingness to apologize and demonstrate his readiness to grow as a person. But it was evident to me that they were only contacting me because they required my assistance, so I wasn't going to fall for it immediately soon. If Thomas truly felt guilty for anything, he should have phoned me that day and apologized. He didn't have to wait long to see I wasn't going to make things right by returning to my house. Even when I did not return that day, he did not contact me. In fact, he didn't feel the need to call me until my brother returned with my belongings. Because of this, I believed his apologies were empty and worthless, and I didn't have to wonder why Rob was apologizing to me. I realized he needed to find a method to pay for his own education, and up until now, I had been paying his fees. He still needed my aid because he had 2 years till graduation, I am his only chance since Thomas, being the lazy brat that he is, cannot assist him because he does not have any money. He probably didn't consider the idea that he could have worked or borrowed money to pay for college, like most of us do. Even though they apologized, I felt let down since I knew they were saying it to get out of it, rather than because they truly felt guilty. I eventually recognized that I loved Thomas more than he did, and that he did not deserve my love, even if it took me a long time to discover it. For 6 years, he had only promised to make things right between Rob and me. However, he had only gotten Rob this far by pushing him to change without ever accepting responsibility for his actions. It was time for me to prioritize myself and let him go. Rob had finally mustered the guts to behave in this manner, because he truly believed he would get away with it. I notified my lawyer about the divorce, but I also told him I was going to sue them for the suffering they had caused me. I decided to write back to Thomas after reading their messages and seeing how regretful they were. After waiting patiently for them to modify their ways, I informed him that I was proceeding with the divorce, and that he had no influence over me, but because it wouldn't happen again, I didn't want to sit around and be treated poorly over and again. When I awoke the next morning, he had sent me an additional 100 SMS. They begged me to remain and said they'd do whatever to make sure I was there. He also tried phoning me several times at night, but I was asleep and had turned off his alarms, so I had no idea he was attempting to contact me. In his messages, he appeared to be really willing to do whatever was required, but I realized he was simply saying these things to attract attention since he had done it so many times before. And that's when I became quite upset. I had given in to him previously, but this time I decided to set a boundary and see if he would help me get things in order. If not, I might be back. I was mainly interested in hearing his thoughts since I had already made my decision after much deliberation. I was not going to breach my word. There was no way I was returning. I responded by writing that I would go to couples counseling and stay with him provided he vowed to never speak to his son again and to completely remove Rob from his life. I informed him there was no other way out of this position, and that I would proceed with the divorce until he was ready to do the same. A few hours after I made my decision, he sent me another message. They said Rob wasn't sure what to say to me because he just had them. I put him in a difficult situation, and he needed time to think about it. He loved me, however, and refused to give up on us. He begged me not to seek a divorce, but I told him that it would be better for him if I did not become involved. The fact that he was even thinking about it demonstrated that neither Rob nor I were really important to him. Then I believe he knew I didn't want to go back to him. Then, he said I was playing mind tricks with him, attempting to manipulate his thinking. After that, I shut off my phone since I didn't want to talk to any of them anymore because his tone made me angry. I took a snapshot of the chat and forwarded it to Rob. After I emailed Rob the images, Thomas fled the home because he believed it was embarrassing that his father was thinking about breaking connections with him to save his marriage. Since then, 2 days ago, Thomas has done all he can to contact me. Thomas believed that both of us had messed him up, and he blamed me for beginning the whole affair. He's ranting at me and blaming me for his current condition, but I don't feel horrible about it. I believe this was a little way to get back at him for supporting his child while mistreating me for 6 years. This is nothing compared to what I have gone through. He has said that he worked hard to keep Rob and I in a healthy balance, and that he was always concerned about our happiness, but I never recall feeling joyful. Anyway, I don't feel too horrible about what I did. But my brother believes I should have just let it go, rather than attempting to make things worse between them. He told me it wasn't worth it, and he normally advises people not to seek retaliation, so it aligns with who he is. I'm not sure whether I should feel awful about it, and my mental health isn't great right now, so I need others to support my decision. AITA, does that imply I pushed to make my soon-to-be ex-husband and his children argue because they have always despised me? Update: I stayed with him because I liked him, and when you ask someone, you allow them to pull strings for you. I hadn't realized for a long time that he might not love me as much as I loved him. These are the types of things I believe individuals do when they try to take advantage of others. That's precisely what went through my head, and I'm not going to let it get to me. Someone who freely acts as a slave is not the same as someone like myself, who was duped in the name of love. It took me a long time to discover that I was the only one who had to sacrifice things in order to keep our relationship running, which was unfair. Some people may believe I am weak since I spend so much time with him. But I don't really care. Of course I still care for him, but I finally found the courage to break up with him. And that, in my perspective, is a significant achievement. So I'm not going to make myself feel horrible about it. Like many others, I made a mistake. Also, I believe everything is okay. I'd like to thank everyone who has been friendly to me, including those who have not. I don't really care. First, I'd want to thank everyone who has supported me and complimented my work. It goes without saying that I am ending my marriage. Additionally, Thomas was served with divorce papers yesterday. He had been living on my money for 3 years, so I doubt he'd fight. But I suppose we could eat a snack. I requested for a significant sum of money as payment. I'd also like to get compensated for all of this. However, due to his present financial circumstances, I doubt he would be willing to repay me right now. But don't worry, we can always figure out a long-term solution to repay you. That isn't even an issue right now, though. If he tries to tell us what the rules are during our mediation sessions, we will leave with everything. Some people are concerned that what I did with my brother strained our relationship. It wasn't particularly essential. My brother dislikes arguing, therefore he did not try to cut me off or tell me to apologize for their actions. He just informed me that he didn't believe it was a good idea to talk to them anymore and get back at them or anything like that. I apologize if it looked overly emotional, but it was only a concept. We haven't discussed it since. We don't believe it's significant. This is excellent because Rob and Thomas have not called me in a few days. I just want some peace and quiet, nothing to do with them. I moved out of the motel I was staying in and now live with a buddy. I'm hoping no one comes here to find me. First, hello to everyone. After a few weeks, we have our first mindfulness lesson today. Tomorrow's the day. As I predicted, he refuses to give me the requested payback money. The fact that his son destroyed my automobile makes this appear strange. He must have forgotten that he pledged to repay me, therefore he should agree to do so at the very least. He had not signed any documents or arrangements. I apologize, but I've received a number of texts from him that are simply typical discussions. He promised to repay all of the fees I paid as soon as he had the money. Despite the fact that I do not have a contract, I believe this will enough for the time being. People who were wondering why I left home should realize that it is a rental property. I walked out. After years of trying to figure out how to share the rent since his name was on the lease, and I didn't believe it was worth fighting for. As soon as I locate a flat near where I work, I'll be leaving my friend's place and living on my own. My brother has his own family, and while they've made me feel welcome, I can't actually live there. I don't want to force anyone give up their place either. But that's how things are right now. Hopefully the divorce discussions will conclude soon, so that I may move on. I've already tried to forget about Thomas by concentrating on my career and moving forward. Moving on is difficult, even though I know he was awful for me, and it is best for me to do so. But I know I have to deal with him tomorrow, even if I don't want to, since I'll always like him. Who knows? He could do something bad, and I'll come to despise him. I can only hope for the best in this situation. If I post any further updates, they will undoubtedly be after the divorce. I'll be quite busy for the next few months, until the divorce is completed. And I doubt I'll have time to keep you all up to speed on anything that happens. Good luck to everyone. Message 3. Hello everyone. It's been a while, folks. Thus, as promised, I have returned after my divorce. My divorce was completed last week, and it has been around 7 months since my previous post. I haven't stopped partying since then, since the last few months have been really difficult and stressful for me. However, now that it is finished, I have been spending more time with my family and friends. In fact, I'm planning a vacation to Greece with several high school pals. As long as I have the opportunity, I plan to enjoy every moment of my life as it is today. I don't want to speak about how painful the divorce process was, but at the very least I got all of the money I was entitled back, plus some extra, because he couldn't give it all to me at once. Since then, Thomas has been behaving like a victim on social media, and the majority of our mutual friends have supported him. They believe I was too hasty to file for divorce and never truly loved him, because it was so simple to get over my ex. Since I returned the money they owed me, they have been calling me the gold digger and the most selfish person they've ever encountered. I don't see why it makes me the bad person. Anyway, I'm delighted these folks have revealed who they truly are, and I can confidently claim that they were never my true pals to begin with. As I previously stated, I broke connections with them and everyone else who supported one side of the divorce, since I do not need this type of negativity in my life, and will now enjoy it to the fullest. My family and friends are all I have left, and I feel like I've discovered myself again.